how when a person is several years into their CMC journey and has gotten some ministry experience under the supervision of their lead pastor uh, and their superintendent and the conference leadership, they're probably going to come in for a deployment interview. Can you tell me a little bit about the purpose of the deployment interview, the timing of the deployment interview, and really like why is a person coming in to have that interview?
The deployment interview is based on our deep conviction that the call of God is on everybody's life. And that the call of God is not simply discerned by an individual in a solitary journey, but that the call of God is affirmed, developed, and discerned in the context of relationship. So one of the big responsibilities of MEG board members is, with a person, hearing from God about that person's calling and trajectory in life and ministry. We are very intentional in talking about a deployment interview. You will not hear our team referencing ordination interviews. We talk about deployment interviews because we believe every Christian is to be developing their ability to be more effective in influencing people for the purpose of the kingdom of God.
Yeah.
But some people who are going through the CMC journey will be deployed to be ordained as a pastor. And so that is one of the purposes of a deployment interview, to consider somebody for ordination as a pastor.
Great. So in the process of that interview, what are some of the questions and what's the nature of the conversation that the MEG board would be having with this person?
Sure. It's important to keep in mind that by the time a conference ministerial candidate comes to a MEG board for this type of interview, they're already known to this MEG board, at least to some of the members who have been on the MEG board for more than a year or two. They've already been in the process of working on our outcome-based expectations of what it means to develop head and hands and heart. They've been working with a mentor. Our CMCs will have taken classes in a couple different modalities of online, correspondence, in-person classroom kinds of things. So what we're looking for is to understand how across the course of the years of being a CMC, how has this person grown and changed? In other words, how have they developed? And we're looking to understand, when you see what this person is moving toward, like what kind of impact, what kind of role, what kind of calling do we see this person has in their life?
Yeah. So we'll get back to some of that as our last question, but in the midst of the interview, what are the questions that the interviewee, that this CMC might have for the MEG board when they come before them?
Well, the CMC might say to the MEG board, like, so I've answered these questions you've asked me about what I'm learning. I've answered your questions about how I'm growing, what kinds of ministries I'm doing. I've answered your questions about how I've been changing. So where do you think this is leading? Like a CMC might be really intrigued to understand, what do people see is happening in their life? The CMC might have questions about, if I'm going to be ordained, like, what will this mean for me? Will I just stay at the church where I'm at right now? Will you offer me a church in a different town? Will you send me out to start a new church? So the CMC might be asking questions of, if they're deployed as an elder, how might they be used in ministry?
Right. So from what I'm hearing from you, Al, there's a few different possible outcomes that a person might come as a result of this interview. I'm hearing you say that to be deployed as an elder is one, and then there's some non-elder deployments that we would say. Can you talk a little bit about the non-elder deployment that you referenced?
Yeah, absolutely. So because we believe every Christian has a calling to make an impact for the kingdom of God, we realize that some people will make a maximum impact by being part of a community of believers and taking a role as a partner or a member in that community of believers. We might call that serving in the local church. We might call that calling to lay ministry, which is, in a general sense, it's saying it's a non-ordained role. But it's not a lesser role. Like the highest calling on a person's life is what God's calling is for you.
Yeah.
And so there's not a ranking of priority or importance. So being deployed in lay ministry, just being told by the MEG board, we really see you as being a high impact person to work with children's ministry in your local church would be an example. We also have a standing in our network called a deacon, like a credentialed deacon. So this person could be affirmed by their local church board to have a unique role of service to the local church as a deacon. There's lots of information that we have published about that type of thing. Some people have a calling to chaplaincy, to work at a nursing home or with the organization that deals with really deeply broken people, to work with fire departments, police departments, whatever it might be. So some people are deployed into chaplaincy. So there's a whole diversity of ways in which we say to a person, here's some alternates to ordained eldership that might be more specifically your calling.
Great, that's really good to know, and it's good to keep in mind that it's not a failure for a candidate, for a CMC, to move forward as a lay person who's going to teach Sunday school or work in children's ministry, or for a person who's going to be a missionary or a chaplain. Because we don't want a person who God has called to be a chaplain at a hospital to serve as a senior pastor of a local church. We want them to answer God's call in their life.
It would be a misunderstanding of this process to say that if you're called by God, you have to be a pastor. Right. So the success in our process is always to help people get into the calling that God has for them. Now, so one of the outcomes could be to be deployed as an elder, which means a person is given a credential and standing as a pastor in our system. They become a member of their conference. But it's just one of the options of a successful deployment interview.
Great. Well, there's more details about the deployment interview in the MEG board interviews guide, and if you review that before you do these interviews, it'll be a great interview.
Very good.